Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tanjo-e service. As it was briefly mentioned earlier by Nancy, this service is to commemorate the birth of Shinran Shonin. Usually, we have a Hatsumairi service along with Tanjo-e. However, unfortunately, we didn't have any children who applied for this year. Let's hope we have more children to join our Sangha next year. So following the month of May is also filled with a celebratory mood. In April, we observed Hanamatsuri, the birth of Siddhartha Gautama, who later became Shakyamuni Buddha. And in May, we celebrate the birth of Shinran Shonin, the forebear of our Jodo Shinshu tradition. And speaking of celebration, we had Mother's Day last week, and then new Pope was selected, a first American Pope, so that's very exciting. And also, many schools and colleges have their graduation ceremonies in this month. I'd like to take a moment to congratulate Galilea Marquez, who just completed her undergrad degree at USC. Yay! What a wonderful achievement. I'm sure there are other Sangha members and family members who are also graduating this year. And we celebrate with all of you. We'll have a special graduation ceremony, family service next month. So I encourage you to bring your graduate and join us in honoring their achievements. Okay, when I think about Shinran Shonin's life, I don't picture someone who saw himself as above others. I imagine someone really down to earth and humble. Someone who spent his life not just learning the teachings, but really asking, what does it mean to live a life as a human being? He wasn't trying to be perfect or act like he had it all figured out. He wasn't trying to impress others or establish a new school. Instead, he questioned the very nature of existence. He struggled with doubt. He experienced loss, exile, and hardships. And through it all, he didn't stop turning to the Dharma, not as an escape from life, but as a way to embrace life more fully with all its joys and struggles. When I was in school to learn Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu teachings, we had multiple classes. We studied the life of Shinran Shonin. In one of those classes, we used this little textbook, literally titled Forebear Shinran Shonin. And as you can see, it's a tiny book. It only has 75 pages. But despite its size, it really made an impression on me. Each chapter in this book includes selected text pulled from different sources like Shinran's letters, writings, or related records. The way the class worked was that each student was assigned a chapter, and we had to do our own research and reflection. We'll analyze the text and come up with the discussion materials for the rest of the class. Then, we'd all talk about what that chapter meant to us. I really enjoyed each classmate's presentation, and every class ended up being a meaningful experience for me. But the very first one felt especially special. The title of the first chapter was Having Been Born as a Human. That's how the whole course began, and honestly, it set the tone for everything that followed. In this chapter, there were 3 selected texts, and the first one was from the Kyogyo Shinsho, which is Shinran's main writing. The English translation goes, "Oh, the life of human beings is like a fleeting dream or illusion. It is not something permanent or real. Life is fragile and cannot be held onto forever. In just a single breath, this world passes away. Once we lose this body, we cannot return to it again. If we do not awaken here and now, even the Buddha cannot help us. So I sincerely hope that you keep the impermanence of life close to your heart and live this life in a way that leaves no regrets. Some of you might recognize this message. It sounds very similar to Daniel's letter, White Ashes. But I think the reason this was chosen as the very first reading in our textbook was to really set the tone at the beginning of the journey we were about to start. The message it carries is something like this. If you're spending your days blandly thinking, I still have plenty of time because I'm young, the end of your life might come in the blink of an eye. And then that moment comes, you might find yourself with regrets. So instead, it's encouraging us, no matter our age, to live each moment with awareness. Each of us has our own story of how we encounter the Dharma. I always enjoy hearing other people's stories because, like many other ministers, I just happened to be born in a temple family. But even then, I didn't really understand what kind of teaching Jodo Shinshu follows until I started learning it for myself. And honestly, there is still so much I want to explore and dig into deeper. But overall, I feel that the essence of Jodo Shinshu is found in our everyday lives, in how we live, how we relate to others, and how we come to see ourselves. It's not something separate from daily life. It's right there within it. I wasn't assigned to this chapter, going back to this book's first chapter, and in that class I wasn't assigned to analyze the first chapter, but I remember the student who was. She introduced a quote from Reverend Manshi Kiyozawa, one of the pioneers of modern Shin Buddhist studies. He lived during the Meiji era, around the late 1800s to early 1900s, and was deeply involved in reforming our denomination. His words, "What is the self? This is the fundamental question of human life. This is a short and clear question. It's easy to convince yourself that you know yourself. As we grow, our brains develop, and we start to form our own opinions and thoughts. We learn what we like and what we don't like. And once we enter the working world, our jobs often become a part of our identity. Maybe some of you are a teacher, maybe someone's nurse, I'm a minister. These labels start to define who we think we are, but these are surface level things. What Reverend Kiyozawa's question is pointing to is something much deeper. It's not just about our preferences or personalities. It's about the core of who we are. Some of you may have joined the Japan trip 2 years ago when the anniversary ceremony was being held at Honzan. The theme for that ceremony was Namu Amida Butsu, to discover the meaning of having been born as human beings. This being the theme means, to this day, we're still living with and exploring that same question. I'm grateful we have this space to reflect and share together. Questions like, what is the self? Or what does it mean to be born as a human being? Aren't questions we answer once and move on from there. They're questions we return to again and again and throughout our lives. One more thing I wanted to mention is that my professor back in school brought up this Anpanman theme song on the very first day of our History of Jodo Shinshu class. Do you know what Anpanman is? It's a very popular Japanese children's character and a hero who is made out of red bean bread, ampang. And this theme song begins with the phrase, "Why was I born? What am I living for? I don't want to live without being able to answer that." And a little later it continues, "What makes you happy? What brings you joy? I don't want to reach the end without knowing that." And this is from an animated show that 2 or 3-year-old watch. And they've only been in this world for a couple of years, and those are the questions they're being asked every time they watch. And I also used to watch Anpanman when I was a kid. But of course, back then I wasn't thinking about the meaning behind the lyrics. So when my professor brought it up in class and said, "This is Shinshu, Jodo Shinshu," it really stuck with me. That was one of my very first impression of Jodo Shinshu. And I was reminded of this as I was writing this talk. I would have played the video of this theme song here if I could have, but I think the copyright might be the issue due to our streaming. But I know you can watch it on YouTube, so if you're interested, look it up, Anpanman theme song, and there's going to be English translation. Anyway, going back to the topic of Tanjo-e, I'm grateful that I was able to encounter Shinran Shonin and the guidance of Jodo Shinshu. The student who was assigned to take care of the first chapter from this textbook, I remember she also mentioned that for her, Shinran Shonin isn't someone like a mentor, but rather he is a Dharma friend who walks alongside with her, even though he is physically not there. In Japanese, Dharma friends are often called ondobo ondogyo. These words refer to anyone who walks the same path of the Nembutsu and shares in the Dharma together. As I continued learning about the teachings and about Shinran Shonin himself, I started to relate more to what this student had said about him. Not as some distant figure, but as a Dharma friend. We might not find clear answers right away to questions like, what is the self, or what does it mean to be a human being? But that's okay. These aren't questions we rush to solve. They're questions we live with, return to, and reflect on throughout our lives. It wouldn't be easy to walk this path or try to face these questions alone. But I'm truly grateful to have the Sangha and Dharma friends to walk alongside. On this day of Tanjo-e, I feel especially appreciative for the teachings and the long history of our tradition that were established and passed down to us. Thank you for being here to share this meaningful day together. Thank you.